all the cameras are, oh, now it's recording. All of the videos are off. We've disabled the chat because this is a short chat, but we will be sending out resources and a copy of this once we're done, just in case anybody has to hop off. Don't worry about it. You will get a recording. So welcome to our discussion on $10 a day childcare. I'm going to have everybody do a quick intro of themselves. Eva, do you want to go first for a really quick? Go.
Good afternoon. My name is Eva Lacson. I am the VP of Childcare with the Neighbourhood Group. I'm joining you from Toronto, Ontario, and then as the VP, I oversee 11 licensed childcare sites and have been in the childcare field for over 25 years.
Right. Carolyn, you want to go next?
Sure, absolutely. My name is Carolyn Ferns. I'm the policy coordinator at the Ontario Coalition for Better Childcare and a board member of Childcare Now, Canada's national childcare advocacy group. A former early child educator. I'm also a mom of a 6-year-old who's recently been through all the childcare struggles.
Great. And Minister Gould.
Yeah, hi, thanks, Allison. So I'm Karina Gould. I'm the Minister of Families, Children and Social Development with the federal government. So I'm responsible for Canada's Canada-wide early learning and childcare initiative. I am also the mom of a 5-year-old who also just went through the early learning and childcare system in Ontario. He's in JK now, so we don't use childcare anymore, but I'm really looking forward to this conversation.
Great. And I'm Allison Venditti. I'm the founder of Moms at Work. We are a national advocacy organization / giant Facebook group / all sorts of things. And my kids are 11, 9, and 5. So we've spent a lot of time in daycares, and I actually started my career in daycares. So that's it. We're going to jump right into sort of getting started with all the questions. So let's start. And again, we're here for half an hour. I just wanted to base people. So we're not taking questions. Our goal of today's event is to check in with all the stakeholders from childcare on how $10 a day childcare is kind of rolling out. So let's start right in. With any national initiative, it's not an overnight fix, as we've seen over the past year. Each province is doing its own thing. So as parents, some people are having a hard time. It can be confusing to navigate. So thanks for being here to answer our questions. Minister Gould, can we start with you? Can you just sort of give us a general update on where each province and territory is at with $10 a day childcare plan and how it's going so far?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's a national initiative, but it's implemented by the provinces and territories. So every province is a little bit different. Across the board, every single province and territory achieved a 50% fee reduction by the end of December. So wherever you live in the country, if your child is in registered or licensed care, you would have seen a 50% fee reduction as of last December on an ongoing basis. With regards to, there's a number of provinces now that have reached $10 a day. So that's Newfoundland, Quebec was already there. They're actually less than $10 a day. They're like about $8.70. And then you have Manitoba, Saskatchewan, and Yukon, and Nunavut that are all at $10 a day. BC has a more complicated model because they implemented a 50% fee reduction across the board, but then they have $10 a day sites. And so they, of their 96,000 licensed spaces, they have about 12,000 that have been designated for $10 a day, and they're looking to expand that access over the next number of years. And then on top of that, so for the sites that aren't $10 a day, they also have an income tested subsidy program for folks. So BC is a bit more complicated. Ontario maintains its subsidy program as well. So even when they've done a 50% fee reduction, for folks who were on subsidy before, they'll still remain on subsidy today. So I hope that's helpful.
Yeah, that was a really quick update. And let's get the update sort of. Carolyn, do you want to touch on from the ECE perspectives, how it's going?
Sure. So I guess, first of all, for parents across the country that have a childcare space now, this has been great news and a game changer, right? They've seen a reduction of 50% or more for some parents of their childcare fees. For the sector as a whole, change is always difficult to navigate, and this has been tricky so far. But huge amount of goodwill on the part of the childcare sector. They want this program to work, and they're working to implement it as quickly and as well as possible. The sticking points, the things that are showing themselves to be major challenges, is that we're rolling out this program at the same time that we have a huge workforce crisis in childcare and a shortage of early child educators and childcare workers. And so here in Ontario, it's particularly bad, but across the country, the same trend is happening, which is that lots of childcare programs aren't at capacity right now because they cannot staff. And so, where we're really pushing with our advocacy and working with the sector to try to find solutions is in trying to improve the wages and working conditions for staff so that we can retain more early childhood educators and attract new ones, so that we can have all programs at capacity and then start expanding more and as quickly as we can so that more families can have access to this amazing program.
And then we're going to go to Eva, but I'm going to say, as someone on the HR side, I'm like, staffing is a big issue for healthcare and like every frontline worker. So I think that's a big sticking point, right? Like, if you can't have spaces if you don't have the staff, right? Talking about daycares, and then we can go to Eva, who probably agree with a lot of that.
Yes, I'll just piggyback on what Carolyn has, said. Basically, we're really struggling. We have spaces and availability, but we don't have teachers to provide the care. And, we're not, at TNG, we strive for quality, and I'm sure every operator is striving for quality. So we're not just, hiring whoever, but, with the wage floor, like starting at 19 and ending at 24, while it's a start for those that, get paid less than this, it's still kind of pales in comparison to people that are in the school boards and working with higher wages. And now that inflation is in play, it causes like a whole lot of issues for us trying to find workers, period. So it's challenging for sure. I know for my staff are very happy for our families because they finally got a break on their fees, because the fees are so high and so unaffordable. But at the same time, it's a little bit confusing for them because, they don't know what that means for their job. And there's like a lot of guidelines that come with this plan, right? And so they're feeling like there's no autonomy. There's no, like, they can't do their own thing now. We have to follow all the rules that come out, right? So, but this is how the ECs are feeling, and hopefully we can do better so that we can increase spaces and hire more qualified staff.
And I'm going to bring this back to Minister Gould, but I'm going to jump in and say, like, this is, for a lot of people who aren't familiar, I'm like, there's 3 places involved: federally, that kind of put it out; provincially, which is, needs to work with things and provide explanations; and also, like, in, a province the size of Ontario, the municipalities, right, have, like, in Toronto, like the city of Toronto does a lot of this stuff. So, like, it's multiple pieces working together, not just like the feds and then the daycare workers. Do you want to jump in on that and let people maybe know the best place to find more information, like, because it is governed by province?
Yeah, so again, it varies through each province, and Ontario is unique in that it's the only province where municipalities are actually the service provider, if you will. They're the relationship between the childcare provider and government. And other provinces and territories, it's actually with either the Ministry of Education or the Ministry of kind of Children and Youth Services. In Ontario, the Ministry of Education still owns the policy for childcare, but it's the municipalities that actually deliver it. And I would say that while it's true that across the country there are workforce challenges, there are some provinces that are doing more on workforce than others, right? And I would say that, remember, Ontario was the last province to sign on to the Canada-wide Early Learning and Childcare Agreement. And while they've met their affordability goal, they're certainly, one of the furthest behind when it comes to workforce, because they've just gone through the consultations and they haven't announced what they're planning on doing. Different provinces have different initiatives in place, but I can say, in the Yukon, for example, they have a a minimum wage of $30 an hour for ECEs, right? In BC, the median wage for ECEs is now $26 an hour. BC put forward a $4 an hour top up for all of their childcare workers. You know, and they're really focusing on workforce. Manitoba has, you know, announced a wage grid, but also a pension and benefits plan for their ECEs. Newfoundland, PEI, and Nova Scotia all have workforce strategies. New Brunswick put forward right at the announcement, actually, when we signed the agreement, they announced, you know, 50 million of their own dollars to go towards wage top-ups for childcare workers. So, you know, there's a variance by province and territory in terms of what they're doing in terms of supporting workforce. And, you know, there's some best practices out there. And it's funny, when I was talking to the minister from the Yukon, and granted, Yukon's a small territory, but I was asking, like, do you have any workforce challenges? And she was like, no, we really don't, you know. And I mean, I think part of that is because they pay a decent wage when it comes to being an early childhood educator. Now, recognizing the Yukon is much smaller than a province like Ontario, but there are best practices out there that provinces and territories can find. And I would say that, you know, this is something that at our ministerial tables, we are talking about all the time, because each province and territory is actually really committed to making this a success. This is a new initiative, so there's going to be some bumps along the way. I think that's to be expected. And it's only really been in place for, you know, we're going on just 2 years. So it's a brand new initiative. But that being said, you know, there's a recognition that, you know, more needs to be done on workforce, because if we're going to be able to provide those affordable spaces, we have to have a qualified, well-compensated workforce to deliver on that.
And just for context, how far behind was Ontario in signing that deal from the other people? Just so that we can, like, the difference. I think it was like 7 months.
Yeah, like about 8 or 9 months. Yeah.
Right. So that's a significant delay in a 2-year, like in a 2-year program. So just like when people are frustrated, I'm like, and also Ontario is a very big province. So just putting that out there. All right, I'm gonna jump ahead here. So this was a question put out. Is there a chance that we're not going to get there? Or like, what happens? People are worried, like what happens after the next election? Could there be a chance that like they would end this program? Like people are worried about its staying power. So,
well, don't elect the Conservatives. So federally, that's probably your best bet, because I mean, the first thing that Stephen Harper did when he became Prime Minister was basically rip up the childcare agreements that Ken Dryden and Paul Barton had signed with the provinces and territories. And you know, Mr. Poilievre hasn't come out one way or another, but currently, since he's become leader, but before he was leader, he called our childcare initiative a slush fund for parents. So, you know, if you're at all concerned, maybe don't elect the Conservatives, because they're not huge fans of affordable childcare.
Yeah. Carolyn, you want to jump on that?
Sure, I can add on to that. Absolutely. I think that, you know, we have to act as if and push every party that we're not going back, you know, to not having a system. We're not going back to parents paying, you know, their more than their mortgage or more than their rent in childcare fees, and that we wouldn't accept that from any party. You know, we have a Canada-wide early living and childcare system, and we expect it to continue. And I think any parent that's concerned about this, make sure you make that clear to your elected officials and any candidate that wants your vote. So, you know, absolutely, we need to push that we're not going back to a place that we don't have a childcare system in Canada.
We'll go to Eva, but I'm also going to be like, and grandparents, right? You know, and like talking to your parents about this as they're
and employers and anybody that, you know, that cares about childcare issues.
Right. Perfect.
I'm just going to add really quickly that, you know, I think that we're all anxious about that, because, you know, we've put in, like, as operators, we've put in a significant amount of work to get this plan executed. And of course, there's going to be bumps in the road. We understand that. You know, we want to keep our families happy. This needs to be affordable for them, which it is starting to be. And if it gets reversed, I think it would be I think it would be catastrophic, to be honest. And I think that, you know, we have to advocate to make sure that we keep this ongoing.
And maybe I'll just add on there in the sense of how we've designed the program, right? Like, you know, we've signed 5-year agreements with provinces and territories, but we have money booked into Canada's fiscal framework in perpetuity, right? So, you know, there's roughly, you know, $9 billion a year in the federal budget from now on going for early learning and childcare to be transferred to the provinces and territories. And we've also introduced legislation to make it harder. And I'm sorry to be partisan, but I think it's like you have to know the truth. Like you have to know that the Conservatives, like, this is not a priority for them, right? So as Carolyn was saying, like as individuals, as voters, as Canadians, like, you need to make your priorities known. And you know, the Conservative approach is to provide tax credits. Well, tax credits don't build a system, right? They don't increase wages, they don't create spaces, and they don't provide access to folks who wouldn't be able to meet that financial barrier from the get-go, right? So it's really important that we keep going. And I would say that, you know, every province and territory across this country has bought in to this initiative, and they understand how important it is. I mean, like, today is the Alberta provincial election, and the UCP in Alberta is actually campaigning on $10 a day childcare, and they were one of the last provinces to sign on. But they've now started to understand that this isn't just important, you know, to provide lower child care costs for families, but it's actually a huge part of their economy. And we were able to get to where we are, unfortunately, because of the COVID pandemic, and all of a sudden, employers, business leaders, community leaders went, oh, wow, if parents have young kids at home, they actually aren't very productive. They actually can't work, because turns out taking care of children is like a pretty hard, difficult thing to do, right? And so there was this like collective moment in society where we realized that, you know, it was actually a social good and an economic good for us as Canada to make this investment.
So I'm going to ask each one of you, because parents are really confused. They're like, okay, so where do I get my updates? Like, where should I be going? Because they don't want to bother their, you know, staff. They don't want to bother their child care providers. They're not calling Minister Gould in her spare time to get answers. So where would you direct people? Where's the best place for them to get information? Carolyn, do you want to start with where you've been pointing people?
Sure. Well, so here in Ontario, as Minister Gould pointed out, it's municipalities that are the service system managers for childcare. That's what we call them. And every municipality in Ontario has a page on Canada-wide. It lets you know what's happening locally, what the fee reductions are, what programs in your area have opted in, you know, are part of the system now, and which ones aren't. And so here in Ontario, it would be to the municipalities that I tend to direct people to. And then if you're interested in being involved in advocating to keep this system and grow this system and ensure it's accessible to more families, you know, come and join us at the Ontario Coalition for Better Childcare, childcareontario.org.
From the daycare provider, if you want to jump in, where people, same place? Yep.
We've just really directed them to the children's services, and who their contacts are at the Toronto Children's Service. But also, you can just Google it and it'll come up on, you know, honestly, CWELC Ontario, it just comes up.
Perfect.
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, all of the agreements that we signed with provinces and territories are public, right? So you can find the agreement, what the federal government has committed to online. You can also look at our action plan. So one of the things that we did was not only have an agreement, but then we asked each province and territory to outline what their plan was to achieve their objectives and when. And so those are all public documents as well. So if folks want to look them up, you're welcome to do that. I think depending on where you are in the country, looking at either the Ministry of Education or the Ministry of Children and Youth Services. Most provinces, it's education. I think it's Alberta for sure is Children and Youth Services, and there's a couple of others, but most of them are and Quebec. Alberta and Quebec are Children and Youth Services, and the rest of the country, I believe, is education. And then you can always reach out to your elected officials, either your provincial representative or your federal representative, But in the case of Ontario, it's probably your municipal representative that would know the specifics for your community. But if you want more information about what the plans are overall or when to expect something, it would be to reach out to the province.
So I'm going to put the final question out here, and then we'll do then we'll summarize it. So what do you say to parents? Like, so there's some places that some daycares that haven't signed on, right? They've chosen not to, or they don't have enough information. Parents are kind of frustrated. How do we know if they're going to sign on, or like, when are they going to sign on? Maybe Carolyn, Eva, you can talk a little bit about like that process a little bit, and you know, like what you would say to parents, knowing that this is still very new, right? Still very new in Ontario.
Yeah. So in Ontario, you know, 92% of licensed childcare programs signed on at that cutoff date. So, you know, the vast majority, and then other ones that have not signed on, that, you know, that other group, they still can, right? Okay. So the first thing I would say, if you're at a licensed childcare program that has not signed on to the Canada-wide system, tell them you expect them to do it. That as a parent, you want them to do it, and that otherwise you're going to be looking at other centers, other places to go. And, you know, I think that's the number one thing. But of course, we have, you know, an issue of so many parents that cannot find a childcare space. And so I think that this is a time that we need to have really clear advocacy and messages from these parents. Parents need to be speaking up to say, we need this system to grow. There's, you know, talking about the political question and the next election, and you know, what the Conservatives might do here. They're going to be looking at parents that cannot get access and dangling a carrot in front of you saying, hey, wouldn't you prefer a tax credit so you could just find whatever you can find and we'll give you a tax credit for it? Yeah. We have to be crystal clear as parents that we want this childcare system built. We want it built faster. We want it to be high quality for our children. And we want the staff to be well paid so that they're the consistent staff, so our children can form relationships with them over the years that they're in childcare. So I think there's you know, a huge advocacy piece that's needed from parents so that we're crystal clear that we're not going back to the old market-based system. But if you're in a center that's not part of CWELC, tell them you expect them to join.
Yeah.
I'll just add that our families are extremely happy that we've signed on to CWELC. And ever since we announced that we were signed on, we've seen an increase in uptick in registration. We just can't keep up with the registrations because we don't have the staff. But you know, another thing that I did hear from the parents is they didn't quite understand the age cutoff. I think some of our school age families were a little bit disappointed that it didn't include their children, and they were, you know, asking why. And realistically, because we've got two systems now, we've got the CWELC dealing with the lower fees, and then we've got individual school age fees. We're looking at increases because of the fact that, you know, there's all the costs that have gone up, and, you know, we've got to increase the fees, unfortunately. And so we're losing a lot of families out of our school age program. And you know, if we can advocate for the CWELC to cover them, I think everybody would be happy. But I say those that have not signed on, they should sign on. It's a great thing.
Minister Gould, do you want to do that? And then we'll.
Yeah, no, like, I mean, as Carolyn was saying, 92% have signed in on Ontario. Across the country, like by province, by territory, it ranges between like 94 and 97%. So, you know, most licensed providers have signed on, and most, if they have not, have the opportunity to do so. And what we do hope is that as people sign on and they kind of see how it's going, that they want to continue to be part of it. But, you know, a lot of that depends on the relationship in Ontario that they have with the municipality, or in other places with the province or territory. And I think, you know, as we're going through the system, that predictability for providers is really important to understand what, you know, what their cost framework will look like and what their reimbursement framework will look like. So that's certainly something that, you know, whenever I speak with my PT counterparts, I try to reinforce that predictability is really, really important. And more than anything, the communication and engagement, right? Like, talk to your providers, talk to your family, see what's working, see what's not, and then adjust accordingly. That's how we are trying to do things at the federal level. We are trying to have a very open relationship with provinces and territories to make sure that we're iterating and that this is evergreen, and continuing to build and to improve. And I'll just jump on what Carolyn said. Like, we have to keep building this system. We cannot go backwards. Like, we saw that when you didn't have intention, the system wasn't, it didn't provide a system that works for everyone, right? And so let's keep moving forward. Let's keep doing this hard work. The affordability pieces are a little bit easier. And, that's one of the reasons why provinces and territories have been able to move forward on that piece, because the other stuff is harder, right? And so that now is the time to do this hard work to make sure that we're doing that expansion, because we want to ensure, and that's our objective, that every family who needs or wants a childcare space will have access to it. And that's why we committed to building another 250,000 spaces by 2026. So it's not very far away. We've built 50,000 already. So, we can do it. We can keep going, but it's going to take a lot of work from everyone involved.
Right. And I think I'll jump back because I don't think it was I don't think we fully did it. The one bigger question that we heard from our community is sort of like concerns around inflation, right? So the question, more than one person was like, is this funding going to be able to keep daycares up like with inflation? Because, is that a thing? And I didn't know the answer. So I'm assuming, I was like, does anybody know that?
We did negotiate the agreements before before kind of the increase in inflation. But that being said, each province and territory has a bucket of money, right, from which they can draw on from the federal government. Like, in Ontario, it's $10.2 billion. And let me remind everyone, like, there's nothing stopping a province or territory from investing their own additional resources.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
And like in Ontario, for example, the estimated return on investment for the $10.2 billion from the federal government is like between $1 and $2 billion to the government of Ontario. So like a year, right? Like, so they could easily, reinvest some of that money, because right now, what the childcare plan basically was before this was a tax credit. So, now that fees are reduced, the tax credit is also reduced because people are paying less upfront. And so that's additional money that could go back into the system, right? And plenty of provinces and territories have put their own money forward, right? And so there's nothing stopping provinces from doing that.
Yes. So let's flag that really quickly before Carolyn jumps in there. Provinces have the option and ability, and many have, to put their own money as part of this program to raise wages, to do whatever, but that is not anything that the feds can force. Like, you can't dictate that to them. That's their decision. So they're provincially, that's a good place to go. Carolyn, in terms of advocacy, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I agree 100%. But we have seen, to the original question about what childcare centers are facing, here in Ontario, we know that programs are facing that issue, because the province had said to them that the cost escalation that's built into funding for this year is only 2.75%. And we know what inflation is, right? So yeah, something doesn't work out there. So absolutely, I completely agree with what Minister Gould is saying. Provinces can and should be increasing their childcare budgets, their provincial allocations to childcare. And here in Ontario, that budget has been flatlined for years. So absolutely, the province should step up. And I love the way you framed that, Minister Gould, to reinvest some of the money that we know that they're getting from the advantages of having this system in place.
All right, we are at time. If anybody has one more small comment, anything that they want to really add, Minister Gould, do you want to jump in first? Then we'll go to Eva, then we'll go to Carolyn.
Well, thanks for bringing us together. But look, I think this is a really exciting endeavor. It's a lot of hard work, but the impact is so meaningful. And I have to say that, I've been able to travel across the country and hear from parents about how this has changed their lives, right? Like, it's transformative for folks. And, we're seeing an increase in demand because there's more people who can now afford childcare. So that means it's incumbent upon us at all levels of government to, make sure that we are creating those additional spaces. In order to do that, we need to support the workforce so that they can be staffed adequately, right? So, this is all part of the plan, right? We have these 4 pillars of affordability, accessibility, quality, and inclusion. We know we need to do it all at the same time, but there's a lot of really good work. There's growing pains, absolutely. But I know how committed the childcare community is to this. And I'll just say one final thing to Carolyn's point about parents. Use your voice. It's so important. It's so important. One of the reasons, sadly, why childcare has not been on the agenda for the last 50 years is because the powers that be, the pollsters, like when people ask, what are your top 10 issues? Childcare didn't come up as childcare. But when you talk about cost of living, when you talk about affordability, when you talk about, gender equality, it's always in there, right? And so, please speak up, make your voices heard. I know you're busy because you got little kids and you got to work and you got to do all of that stuff, but don't underestimate the power of your voice, whether it's writing to your representative, giving them a call, or when you're voting, because it really does matter.
Yep. All right. Eva, you want to do one final thing and then Carolyn, and then we're done. You're good. All right, Carolyn, last final thing. Where can
Yeah, I absolutely agree, Mr. Gould, that parents raising their voices, we're often so busy just trying to make everything work, just trying to keep our heads above water. But raising your voice about your need to access childcare. And if you're one of those parents that's, lucky to have a space and seeing that fee reduction, lend your voice to childcare workers and early childhood educators who need to have decent work and pay because, first of all, because they deserve it, but second of all, because as parents, we need our children to have quality care. And as you were saying, Allison, sure, there's workforce shortages in every sector. Someone said to me, well, there's workforce shortages in trucking. What is, childcare is no different. No. In childcare, we need to have, our children need to be able to create a relationship and educators to create relationships with children over a sustained period of time. So a shortage, if an educator doesn't show up on Monday, that's a little kid's heartbroken, right? So we need to have the workforce crisis solved. And to do that, we need decent work and pay. So raise your voices for ECEs. Thanks.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for being here. For anybody who's watching, we're sending out a recording afterwards as well with links to everybody's organizations and where to find more information. But thank you for spending your afternoon with us. Right. And thank you for all being here. I appreciate it.